Hello, I'm Drew Colgrove, and this is my informative speech for Coms101. I remember when I was in elementary school, there would be a person that would come into the room every once in a while, and I didn't know who they were, but I saw them in the halls every once in a while. And they would come in with a notebook, a pen, and a seat in the corner, and they would just watch and then take notes. And for me, I was secretly hoping they were taking notes on me so that I could think of myself as some kind of prodigy or whiz kid. But I never did find out who were they taking notes on. But I did find out that they were the school psychologist. The word at that point in time was definitely too complicated for me to ask any more questions. But as it turns out, as I got older, this is something I became very interested in. You might have had similar experiences to the one I just described. And you might not have realized that there was any questions to ask, or if you do, you might have not asked them at the time, which is why I'm here today to answer some of those questions. Whether you realize it or not, the school psychologist career path plays a huge role in student success within school. They not only work with individual students, but they also work with their teachers, their parents, other leaders in the community, anybody that has an influence on their life that the school psychologist can communicate with, get to know the child more, or maybe put a plan in place to help that child using those people of the community. If you're not already, or maybe you might be one day, you might be a parent, you might be a teacher, you might work with somebody within the education system. So I think it's really important to understand what these people do, where they work so methodically to create these academic and behavioral plans that help many, many children. Of course, a school psychologist is not going to see every child in the school. They're usually reserved for students who need exceptional services, so students with exceptionalities, whether it be academically or behaviorally. I personally have worked within a special education setting for the last 4 years in an elementary school. And while I haven't worked right beside a school psychologist most of that time, I have become very familiar with the process that the school psychologist mainly deals in, which is the creation of individual education plans and behavioral intervention plans, otherwise known as IEPs and BIPs. After college, I had a short internship following a school psychologist. And while I did learn from following her that it might not be a career position specifically for me, as I want to be a teacher, it was something that I'm really glad I got to know and something I have a lot of respect for and like to discuss with other people. In college, I have a bachelor's of arts in psychology from the University of Delaware. I also took extra attention to take classes that dealt with child psychology, such as child psychology and developmental psychology. The thesis of my statement is that the school psychologist career field is an overlooked profession that creates impactful change in exceptional children's academic lives and also offers a meaningful opportunity to promote God's values like cooperation, love, and preparation. In order to fully flesh out this argument, I want to start with my main point, which is that the school psychologist career path is an impactful one that affects the lives, both academically and personally, of children. I'm going to do that by talking a little bit about what the career path entails, what it consists of, and I also want to hear a couple quotes or tell you a couple quotes from some professionals that have written on the subject. Then I'd like to transition to my second main point, which is that the career path is often overlooked considering how much training is involved and considering the amount of depression and mental issues we have seen within society within the recent history. Lastly, I want to talk about how this career path is great for promoting God's values. You are in a position, I'll describe the position that you're in and how that position can help you promote values such as planning, love, and cooperation. My first point is that school psychologists have a very impactful influence on children within school. They work behind the scenes to come up with these plans that help struggling students. And the first thing I want to do to talk about this is show you my visual aid, which was conveniently gotten from the National Association of School Psychologists. And I'm just going to summarize for you what this graphic tells us. So basically, this describes what school psychologists do. They provide academic plans, behavioral plans. They provide access to different services that you might not be able to access without a school psychologist. The things that they support um, least restrictive environments, which essentially means that if a student's with exceptionalities, that does not necessarily mean he can't be with a class of typical peers. They support having those exceptional students with other typical peers as often as possible. Also, they serve in different schools, they serve in hospitals, and they serve in anywhere where people might need services for mental health. In other words, the same website, the National Association of School Psychologists online.org, they describe the school psychologist as this. School psychologists apply expertise in mental health, learning, and behavior to help children and youth succeed academically, socially, behaviorally, and emotionally. They provide assessment, support, and intervention services to students. Partner with families, teachers, and other professionals to create safe, healthy, and supportive learning environments. They work with school administrators to improve school-wide policies and collaborate with community providers to coordinate services for students. Now, that was a lot of words. And what I found was that it's a very complex career field. I actually found a handbook on school psychology from Oxford University. And in that, while there was a lot of information I'd love to convey, but that's way too much to talk about now, one of the biggest things I brought from this was this quote. School psychology is obviously a complex, if not the most complex area of study in all of psychology. This is because of the great number of clients that must be served effectively when working with children and the complex relationships children have with parents, family, and peers. So what I gathered from reading that was that school psychology within its history has been very focused on the individual student. But recently, they have been trying to push towards more community action because they realize that that has the biggest positive effect on children. Now that we understand a little bit about what school psychologists do, I want to talk about how they can be viewed as overlooked profession. First of all, school psychologists have to go through a lot of training. The National Association of School Psychologists website describes the amount of training as this. School psychologists receive specialized advanced graduate preparation that includes coursework and practical experience relevant to both psychology and education. This usually includes about 60 to 90 hours of graduate semester hours and a 1,200 hour supervised internship. It goes without saying that it takes a lot of time and effort and commitment to become a school psychologist, which is why I often think it deserves more respect than it gets. According to a Washington Post article posted a couple years ago, they ran some statistics on school psychologists. The National Association of School Psychologists recommend that there's one school psychologist per 500 students. But according to this Washington Post article, just a few years ago, the statistic was that there was one school psychologist per 1,381 students, an over 200% increase to what is recommended. And I think this is super important because if we look at the Association of Children's Mental Health website, they have statistics on there about the rising in depression within children within recent years. For example, 1 in 5 children have some sort of diagnosable mental health problem, while 1 in 10 youth can be diagnosed with severe mental conditions, which is why school psychologists should be treated with so much more attention. For my last point, I want to talk about how the position of a school psychologist is a great opportunity to promote God's values. First, I want to talk about preparation. One of the biggest ideas that I've heard throughout my Christian life is the idea that God has a plan. And that is basically what encompasses a school psychologist day, is coming up with plans, gathering information, observing, learning, knowing people, and then coming up with a plan for their success. As we read in Jeremiah 29:11, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." And this is exactly what school psychologists are doing for these exceptional students. They're coming with a plan that's going to help them succeed in school, whether that be academically or behaviorally. When we move on to another godly value, that of cooperation, I like to think about this quote from Corinthians 12:12 through 14. For as the body is one and has many members, but all the members in that one body, being many, are one body, so also is Christ. For by one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, whether slaves or free, and have all made to drink into one Spirit. For in fact, the body is not one member, but many. I love to think about this quote in its relation to different members of our society. Not too long ago, people with mental health issues were not included in regular everyday society. And it's really awesome to see within the past couple of years how much of an effort in public school they have made to have exceptional students included in the typical classroom. The last is the idea of love. I think of this quote from Philippians 2:3 through 4. Do nothing but rivalry or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look onto only his own interests, but also into the interests of others. When a school psychologist is coming up with a plan, they're not thinking about themselves. They're not thinking about what plan is going to be the easiest for them to implement. They're thinking what plan is the best, most effective plan for this individual student's success. And what people in that person's community can I contact and communicate with to come up with a plan as a community to help this child in all spheres of influences, which is basically the idea of love and understanding each other and being there for each other, which is a huge godly value. And those plans that school psychologists can make can focus on those values and actually create an incentive program for students to actually start behaving in a way that's way more moral. I want to thank you for sticking with me so far. I do want to finish up with a couple of thoughts. As you hopefully see, school psychologists play an integral role in the academic success of many students across the world. And when we consider the amount of education, preparation, and experience it takes to become one, it's no wonder that there's a shortage of school psychologists in the country right now. When you are in a position where you have the opportunity to construct a success plan for a child, you are in a position of great influence and positive change. I want to leave you with this idea. When you are surrounded by dark uncertainty, it is those with the experience, commitment, and plan to find the light. Thank you so much for your time.